and Alice works on the helpline, and she'll tell you about her experiences. So thanks very much, Alice. Just to set the context, our helpline advisors respond to around 2,000 inquiries every year, and we have a team of paid advisors as well as some volunteer advisors, and they do absolutely fantastic work every day of the week. So Alice, I'll hand over to you. I don't think you've got slides, but
No.
you're just speaking to us, so that makes it very easy from the technical point of view.
Hello, everybody. I'm Alice, and as Kathy has said, I volunteer on the helpline. I do a couple of shifts a week, one morning, one afternoon, and I've been doing that for almost 2 years. Today, I will tell you a very little bit about how I came to be volunteering for the helpline. I'll go over a few of the stats that have been produced in the report about the helpline for 2024. And then today I'm going to talk about some of the conversations I have with adults on the helpline. We've got cover of the children's side and the education side from other speakers. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about some of the things that come up in the conversations that we have with adults. So when people find out I volunteer for the helpline, I'm often asked, how come? How did that come about? My journey to the helpline really starts through my children. I'm a mum of 4 boys. 3 of them, the younger 3, have all been identified as dyslexic. And my journey to the helpline really started when I desperately needed the helpline 10 years ago. The oldest of my boys, it was identified very early on in school that he had issues. 6 weeks in after October break, he couldn't remember any of the words he'd learned at school before that. That highlighted it initially and started the process rolling for us. By the time we got to primary 3, the decision was made to teach him to read again because he wasn't taking it in. And by primary 4, we were advised to get additional input from an educational psychologist because the memory issues were way beyond anything that the school had dealt with before. So we were advised to go and visit Jenny Guys in Edinburgh, which we did. She assessed our son, and yes, he was identified as being dyslexic. And the main issues, as we all expected, was working memory and processing. Now, that wasn't a surprise to anybody. We got the report back and handed it into the school, ready for the start of primary 5, which we thought everything would be in place and recommendations were there. And then we got hit with a bombshell that maybe that wasn't the school for our son. And we were asked to consider removing him from school. And we were asked to start looking for alternative schools, and that he could stay that year, but beyond that, they really would be looking for him to leave. We just desperately needed help and didn't know where to turn. And we turned to the Dyslexia Scotland Helpline. The helpline helped us loads. We spoke about the situation, spoke about different things, and the tutors were brought into the conversation, and the person on the helpline gave us the name and contact details for a tutor that was very close to us. And we contacted that tutor, and the tutor took our son on and worked with him for the following 6 to 7 years, right up to his exams. And that was a massive help to us. And I know it helps other people that contact the helpline as well, getting help that way. And I'm glad to say he stayed at school, he stayed at that school, got his exams, and he's now halfway through an apprenticeship. And without that helpline call, it might not have worked that way. So that's my journey to the helpline. And I got the opportunity a couple of years ago to become a volunteer, which I wanted to do. So that's how I ended up here. So I'll go over some of the stats. As Kathy said, we get generally around about 2,000 calls a year. Last year, the total inquiries was 1,668 inquiries. 56% of those were telephone calls, and 44% of them came in via email. The local authorities are fairly stable. It's not over the last few years. There's not a massive change in numbers from each one. It's fairly stable. Some go up a little bit, some go down a little bit, but generally they're fairly stable. Of all the inquiries that we get, approximately 47% of them, which accounts for 784 last year, are regarding children. Adults calling about children, mostly parents, sometimes grandparents. 11% of those, which account for about 87, are calling about adult children, so over the age of 18 or have already left school, and they kind of fall into college, university, or apprenticeships. And 36% of our calls, which is around 600 inquiries, come from adults asking for help. From the calls about children, the age that is asked about the most is 8-year-old, and that's closely followed by 9, 10-year-olds and 7-year-olds. And then it jumps to about 15, which is kind of your exam age, starting at 5s, looking for help, for support for exams. I think it does highlight that there's a lot of identification happening in primary schools, whether it be through teachers or even through parents. Parents will often recognise early on that something's not quite right, and highlight it at school, or teachers will recognise it and highlight it at parents' night. Things will be kept an eye on, looked at, and support and things put in place. And there is a lot of things happening within the primary school. Of the parents that are inquiring as well, about 220 are getting template letters. Now, a template letter, for people that don't know, is a pre-written letter that can be adjusted to send out to formally request an assessment through the school system, and asking the school to start the process of assessment. About 455 of those calls are asking for assessors, a list of assessors within the local area to them. Now, there could be lots of different reasons to why assessors lists are asked for. Firstly, independent schools don't have the option of assessing within the school. You need to get an independent assessment. Other assessment reasons are sometimes the schools will say they don't carry out assessments anymore. Sometimes they'll say you have to wait to a certain age to be assessed, and maybe they're a lot younger than that at that point, and parents want to know on the basis that the sooner we know, the sooner we can put things in place. And the assessment process within the school can be quite lengthy. It can take because it's quite a holistic approach, and everything's looked at and tried out as part and parcel of the assessment. It can take anything from a couple of terms to a year, and some parents just want to know within a few days, a few hours of the assessment's a few hours if it's an independent assessment, but really within a few weeks you have an assessment report back and things can start to be put in place. We do get some calls, about 117 last year, 7% on other neurodiversity and neurodivergencies. The majority of those are visual issues, dyscalculia and ASD. There is a lot of parents still believe that visual issues is an indicator of dyslexia, and it isn't. It can coexist with dyslexia, but it doesn't mean dyslexia. And therefore, these 3 areas that we have to signpost, really. We can give some basic information from leaflets available on our website about the visual issues and dyscalculia, but really we have to signpost them on to places that know much more about them. We are a dyslexia charity, and that's where the advice we give centres. Overall, 92% of all the inquiries are happy with the service they receive on the helpline. A lot of the others, it's because they're calling about different neurodivergencies that we can't help with. Even if they coexist with dyslexia, we can't talk about that area. We can only talk about the dyslexia side of things. Some people think because dyslexia is also involved in the mix, we can help push forward other assessments in other areas. We can't do that, so we do have to signpost those as well. So that's a brief summary of the helpline from last year. And as I say, I'm going to talk a little bit about the kind of things we cover and we talk about with adults. So as I said, we get about 600. Last year we had 600 adults calling, and another 87 where parents called about adult children. As I say, the parents calling, it tends to cover college, university, issues that might be cropping up there, apprenticeships, trying to get help with the college side of the apprenticeship, or helping children, the adult children, to explain to employers where their difficulties lie. From an adult point of view, we get calls from everywhere, really. We get adults that are inquiring about assessment. We get inquiring about further training. Maybe they want to return to work, or they're aware of literacy issues themselves, and they're looking to be directed to where we can find help and support within the community and local to them. That might be adult education centres, it might be colleges. They might even want to get put in touch with a tutor service in order to get one-to-one help and help with building strategies for the workplace, or just helping them with their literacy issues. We'll get people that are in work, people that are that are on placements, or are just starting a new job and feel a little bit overwhelmed as well. From the things I spoke about already with the helpline stats, there is a lot of early intervention with children. It is spotted quite early that children having issues at school maybe need extra support, and things are highlighted, things are put in place, assessments are carried out. The calls we get from adults very much tend to be when they're in trouble, when they really need help. They maybe have up on performance reviews, they may be getting warnings at work, and they're just absolutely overwhelmed with things happening within the workplace, and they tend to leave it a bit to last minute to give us a wee call and ask for some help. Some of the things that we'll get, failing exams as well. Kids at university, they're no longer at home. Parents can't see that they're struggling in the same way when they're off at university. Sometimes lots of things are put in place at school, and they don't truly know why. They just get the extra help, they get the extra time. All these things are organised by parents, by teachers, and it should be discussed with them after a certain age, but they don't always really understand why. So then when they leave school and they've been right through school and they've got their exam results, they've got themselves into university, they think they're okay now, and they don't necessarily tick the box on the entry, the application for UCAS to say that dyslexia is present, and they think they'll be fine. And depending on the course and depending on the subjects they took at school, the first year could be consolidation, it could be a lot of overlearning and revision, and they get through that okay. And then second year hits and it's really quite difficult, and it's new and it's a lot to learn, and they get to the end where they're sitting exams and then they're failing those exams, and then they maybe tell mum and dad that, oh, I'm struggling a bit, and parents will phone and say, what can we do? And really, they sometimes are getting, the universities are talking about holding back a year, repeating a year, taking a year out, and parents just go into panic mode, and they'll quite often phone and say, what can we do? And we will ask the question, does the university know that they're there and that they have been identified as dyslexic? Because if they haven't ticked that box, then nobody will have come looking for a meeting to set up a needs assessment and to set up DSA through SAS in order to help fund the support that they need within university. And it really is advising the parents to tell the children they really need to go and speak to the student services. Now, student services can be lots of different names and lots of different universities. Edinburgh University use disability and learning support, and it's really to look them out and talk about the issues they're having at university, and to get a needs assessment done, get DSA applied for, and really start to make sure that everybody in the all the lecturers are aware of that they need that extra help and that extra support. And that's really what we would advise the parents, really, to start that conversation. And then from what leads from there, they may need to call us back, they may not. We also have adults in performance reviews where there may be the quality of their work is not what's expected. Emails or to clients might not be what is expected. Report writing might have lots of errors and lots of things wrong with it that the employer's not happy with. And And we'll always ask them, does your employer or your manager know that you've been identified as having dyslexia? Sometimes it's a yes, but often they've just told the employer that I've been identified as dyslexic or having dyslexia. And nothing else, they don't say anything else. Sometimes they haven't told them at all. And that is completely up to the individual. It's their choice. There's no requirement to inform an employer. However, we do explain to them that if an employer does not know, then there is no way that reasonable adjustments can be put in place to help to support them. They can't be things put there to help them. There can't be any kind of conversation about what issues you're having if they don't know. So to think about maybe having that conversation with the employer. Also, they will say that if the employer does know, the response from the employer is quite often, well, what can we do to help? And the person that's calling us will often say, well, I don't know what you could do to help. They phone us to ask that very question. What can my employer do? That's a hard one for us. We can very much generalise with the kind of things that can help, but that is very much a conversation that we encourage the person calling us to have with their employer, because it is very individual. Every single person will need a different set of adjustments made. They'll have different areas of strength and weakness that has to be addressed within the workplace. We can tell them about access to work, which is a government-backed system where their job is assessed, not them. And then that can help with putting in adjustments and specialist software or whatever is required for the job that they do. And they do not have to have a dyslexia identification for that to happen. So that could be put in place without identifying yourself or making that identification known to your employer if that's the way you wanted to go. But we will have conversations with, if it's about, sorry, I'm getting myself muddled up. But employers don't always understand the depths of dyslexia. If they've never had a lot to do with anyone that's been identified as having been identified with dyslexia, they might not know the full depth of it. There are employers out there that think dyslexia affects spelling and reading, and that's it. So if somebody just says, I have been identified with dyslexia and leaves it at that, that doesn't necessarily help an employer. And they don't know about the fact that organisational skills could be affected, that memory could be affected, the processing could be affected. And all of that has a huge impact on a day-to-day life at work. Whether you're doing things in the morning or the afternoon has a massive effect if you get very tired with the concentration through the day. Organisational skills come big in play at the workplace. Do you forget to do things? Do you maybe not do things fully, or you were told about something to do in a week's time and you forgot about that? The quality of work that you produce may not be what's expected because of issues with getting information onto paper or not remembering the exact details of how to set things out. So we can have conversations with them about organisation. Again, these are just suggestions to get them thinking about what they really need. Digital diaries that have notifications set up so that they are pinged well in advance of things to do, using colour-coded systems where high priority tasks or emails are in one colour and other things that maybe need to do the following week are in a different colour, order of importance of deadlines and importance. Speaking to employers about, rather than giving me a week's worth of tasks that you've done, maybe just narrow that down to a day and back it up on an email or written down. If there are large pieces of work needing done, large projects need to be done, could you be given additional time? Could you be asked for that stuff to be given to you in advance so that you have much more time to prepare? If there's a lot of reading to be done to prepare for something, could it be sent digitally so that you could use text-to-speech software? If large reports are needed to be done, can you dictate things and then use text-to-speech to proofread and check it? We all know that dictation isn't perfect depending on the software you're working on, but it can help to get the bulk of information down onto paper. And then you can go back and look at it paragraph by paragraph to see if there's errors and things there. Can templates be given to you to show how things need to be recorded if it's in a specific way? If it's a call centre or something like that where you're taking a lot of calls, does specific information need to be recorded? If so, how does that need to be recorded? Could a template be used? Can you use recordings in meetings and things like that if everybody agrees, so that you have that there's software available that can turn recordings into notes, written notes for you, so that takes the pressure out of trying to write notes. You can sit and listen to things going on, using voice memos as well to send to people rather than trying to write emails, if that is appropriate for the thing that you're doing. Sometimes it has to be an email, in which case you can put proofreading software and things into place to make sure that is right. We can, if they're calling about lack of processing speed, for if they're learning new tasks, if things change within the workplace, we can make suggestions to think about then. You know, again, having crib sheets, having flow sheets. Can you video record somebody else logging into that system? Can we have a record that way, so you can go back and look at it if you need to? Can you have is there copies of training records, training information for the new procedures that you can have a copy of, again, ideally digital? And can you get new additional time to learn that new process? If a new process has to be in place by a certain, can you start before everybody else? Is the training modes on the systems? Certainly in retail, a lot of these, you can get a lot of training modes on tills and things in retail. Is there systems in place that you can allow training mode on that as well, that can just allow you to practice without it being a real situation? We can also talk about things in meetings and training as well. Again, there's a lot of training companies out there that are just, that's their job. They're going out and training lots of people. So to make them aware as well, just giving advanced notice of a lot of bulk of reading or anything, again, given digitally. Can training and meetings be followed up with notes, so that people don't have to try and take notes, copy off screens? If PowerPoints and things are used, to have it much more friendly, less text, less words, not big bulks of text break up within the pages. Maybe think about the colour of backgrounds and things that you are using. And just if anyone is going to be required to input into training or input into meetings, they have advanced knowledge that they can prepare those things. No one's going to get a medal for knowing everything straight out the top of their head when asked on the spot. There's no reason why, if you have to prepare sales figures or performance details on your department, that you can't think about that in advance. You have notes and you can prepare for that, so that you can give that information in the training or the meeting that is required. It doesn't have to just come from the top of your head. So just to be aware that these are things to think about. Are these things that might help? Can you speak to your employer about putting some of these in place? I mean, more specialist things may be needed, but that would be job specific. And again, it's about starting the communication so they can talk about what kind of adjustments need to be made. If they're in an open plan office and it's very noisy and you're easily distracted, noise cancelling headphones, simple things that people might not think of that can make a really, really big difference to an employee just trying to get through the day. So that, I mean, so lots of things that we can talk about. We also get calls from employers who will say they've had somebody tell them that they've been identified with dyslexia. What can they do? What kind of things should they be looking at? Which we can give them information on that as well. We also sometimes get employers calling saying they have a suspicion that somebody may be unidentified with dyslexia, and how should they approach that? There's a couple of things to think about there. One is that they may know that they have been identified as dyslexia but don't want to tell the employer, so they have to be careful how they approach that. You may also find that the person doesn't know that they're unidentified with dyslexia as well. So that's something that they'll have to take into consideration. We can talk about assessments, and the cost of assessment can be a big barrier for a lot of people. There is no free assessments available for adults in Scotland. There's just, that's not there. There may be some way, sometime with charity donations and things, but generally speaking, there is no free assessment. Would the workplace be in a position to help fund an assessment? If that's out of the question, we can also talk about screeners. Screeners will not give an identification of dyslexia, but they will give an indication of dyslexia, sometimes someplace to start to get an idea of if it's likely to be something like that, and then whether to go ahead with the assessment. They might not want to jump straight in with an assessment first if cost is an issue. Some employers will give a contribution, some won't. And so that's something to look at as well. We've had people phoning to ask how much more they can do. They maybe already do lots of things to help. We've had a construction company who is they're not a construction, they're a training company for construction industry, and they do lots of lots of training all over the country for all the other construction companies, and they see a lot of people that have difficulties associated with dyslexia within the training room. And I've had a conversation with a gentleman from there who talked about what else could they do. They already have the digital copies of everything. They already give everything out ahead. They do one-to-one training with individuals if needed. They follow everything up with training notes. They do all of these things, everything that we could possibly suggest as a starting point for them. And they wanted to know how to do more. So there's companies and employers out there that really do want to support people. But without the conversations being had between the two, it's difficult. And say nothing really can get put into place if people don't know about it. We have had calls from people who just want to find the words to explain to an employer why things are difficult. We've had receptionists call because they've been asked about hot desking, and they can't find the words to explain to their manager why hot desking doesn't work for them. They need to know where their things are. They need to know where they find things on their own computer, where their own things are lying about, how they've set the computer up with maybe text, text size, text style, line spacing, word spacing, all the things that they need. And then they're having to jump over to a different desk, and they're not quite sure how to explain that to an employer. We have also had conversations with people where things aren't fully explained and left for them to read. That was a council worker who had been at a training session and had sat through the training session and had been asked to sign a document at the end of that training. It was their belief that the signed document was to say they had attended the training, but actually it turns out that document was actually about a change of PPE, that he didn't read that document because he couldn't read the document. He signed the document and then was found to be using incorrect PPE and had been issued warnings through his work because he wasn't in the correct PPE. And something as simple as just explaining what that document was at the end of training. It didn't have to be read word to word to him, but just say, we're changing our policy on PPE. This is what we're changing it from and to. This is what we expect from now on. And can you sign that you understand that? Would not have been a huge issue to anyone just to explain that. His employer did know that he'd been identified with dyslexia, and he found himself in the position of having warnings at work because he couldn't read the sheet of paper that he'd signed, that he believed to be something else, and it wasn't explained. So we get a whole host of things from people. We do get people who find themselves needing legal advice because they maybe have been dismissed. We can't help directly with that. We can signpost to where they can get legal help and legal information, but we can't provide any legal support or help to anybody that calls the helpline. We'll also get calls from people just looking to get forms filled. and things like that. Again, we can signpost to local sorts of advice and things like that that can help with form filling. There's also some, depends who the forms are for, you can quite often call them and they will fill the form out on the person's behalf if they give their answers over the phone. That won't be every form and every company and every organisation, but a lot may help that way. So we get a whole host of people calling that just, and they tend to be because they've suddenly found themselves in a position because people don't understand, people don't fully understand. Colleagues are getting irate with them because every day they ask to do how to do the same thing because they don't understand that the processing of that new procedure takes longer. And once it's there, it's there. But that if they are unaware of the situation, then what they asked me that yesterday, they asked me that the day before, and they don't understand it. So really, we do try and highlight the importance of communicating with colleagues and managers and employers. But again, it is completely up to them whether they let them know. But the help can't be in place if they don't know about it. So that's the kind of things that we speak about on the helpline with adults. And it does vary day to day. As I say, if sometimes you don't hear from many adults for a while, then you'll get more. And the majority of our calls are children. And I would just like to finish with a little example of how the helpline really can make a difference. I had a phone call a few weeks ago. Now, it wasn't anything really out of the ordinary. An overwhelmed mum with an overwhelmed child. They were in S4 at school, coming up to exams, and just felt completely overloaded. There were other neurodivergencies in place as well, which compounded the dyslexia. And they really called because the mum didn't know how to help the daughter, didn't know where to go, felt the school wasn't maybe 100% listening. And the big issue at that point on that day was the sheer volume of work coming home and the sheer volume of reading that involved. 6 pages of A4, she told me, back to back, no pictures, no breaks, no nothing. And this was something that had to be read and answered within a day. The typeface was tiny. It was like a size 6 font. The document had been photocopied numerous times by the school, so it was blobby and not very easy to read at the best of times. And the child had got to the point of dropping subjects and dropping from Nat 5 to Nat 4 because they just felt completely and utterly overwhelmed. Now, again, what needed to be put in place for that child was going to be specific for that child. But I spoke to her about things that she could maybe approach the school with that could help, talk to the child about that to see if these things could help. And that was everything from different coloured of paper, text size, text font, line spacing. If a document had to be given as a paper copy, using digital copies. We spoke about using Call Scotland and Books for All to get digital copies. We talked about lots and lots of things. And they contacted the school and we got an email back to say that I had spoken to her about text-to-speech software and things like that. The school had no idea that the child didn't know how to use this. So that was all put in place in training. They set up dictation and they set up all these things. One-to-one help with the teachers. The teachers involved all said she didn't have to drop out of classes or from Nat 5 to Nat 4. And actually it all finished with a lot of support in place and a lot of backup and a lot of technical help and her continuing on a Nat 5 journey, which again, it just shows, we don't often get feedback like that, but it just shows that after a call to us and a few suggestions to have conversations with the school, and the school was unaware of the struggles to an extent, and lots of things were put in place, and everyone felt a lot better about carrying on and the journey that they were on. And I hope that gives a bit of a general idea of what we do on the helpline and the kind of things that we can help with on the helpline as well. Thank you.